Welcome to Full Faith, Empty Arms, a podcast for those walking the difficult road of infertility, especially within the context of faith. I'm Shannon Adams, here with my dear friend Pam Dennison, and our hope is to create a place where honest conversations can happen, where hard things can be spoken out loud, and where no one has to feel quite so alone. If you pressed play today, we know it might have taken a little bit of courage. Infertility can be deeply personal, isolating, and painful, especially within the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where family is such a central part of life and identity. The idea behind Full Faith, Empty Arms is that both can exist at the same time. It's possible to love God, to have meaningful faith and hope, and still struggle, grieve, and have very real pain. There are many forms of infertility, and while this may not have been a path you chose, we're really glad you found us. We hope these conversations feel a little bit like sitting down with friends who understand. Welcome back, everyone. We have another wonderful guest episode today. Sister Janice Jones is here with me and Pam to share her story and her experiences and faith, and we are really excited to hear that. I know Sister Jones from serving in the Atlanta Temple. And I want to make a little side tangent here and just say, if you ever have an opportunity to serve in the temple, go for it. It is a wonderful experience. It gives you an opportunity to connect with members of the church in your area that you otherwise would probably not connect with, and have recurring conversations and build friendships and relationships. And also, when you're going through something like infertility and you might feel kind of isolated in your own ward, there's a very unique dynamic and sisterhood that exists among your shift. At least that's been my experience. So I've created some wonderful friendships in the temple, met some amazing people like Sister Jones. She and her husband were leaders in the previous temple presidency here in Atlanta. So President Jones was one of the counselors, and Sister Jones was one of the assistants to the matron. So every third Friday, I got to spend some time with her in the temple doing temple work, and it was awesome and amazing. And every time Sister Jones comes to the pulpit, people just smile because they know it's going to be good. They know Sister Jones is going to uplift us and inspire us, maybe entertain us in an unexpected way. But everyone loves the Joneses, and especially Sister Jones. So we are so grateful to you, Janice, for being willing to come on today and share your experiences and story. Is there anything that you want to preface before we just kind of jump into your story?
We can just jump in and start.
We've got a few questions here lined up to kind of guide the story. So we'll just start here with the first one. What was your concept of how family life would go for you when you were first married?
When I was first married, I was a military officer. I was in the military. We were a YSA that got married, and I had planned, I thought I'll stay in the Army until I'm a general and have one or two kids, and I was going to be straight. I was going to be it. Because I have a younger brother. He's 3 years younger than me, but he and his wife were high school sweethearts and got married right after. And so they're the parents of 8 kids. And it seems every year they were having a child or something. And then I have two younger sisters. They have four each. All of them, except for one, my youngest sister, her last child is 6 months younger than my son Daniel. And but all my other nieces and nephews are older than Daniel, older than my son. So I thought I'm gonna be fertile too. They all fertile, having all these babies and having a great time, got all the children and everything. And I was surprised that I was having difficulty conceiving and that I never knew anyone in my family who had fertility issues like that. When I talked to my mom and talked to my grandma and all that. And in the beginning, I just thought I'll have a baby or two but it didn't happen that way. But after 6 years of marriage, I finally conceived. It was so surprising to me. I didn't even know I was pregnant. I was running around. jogging and exercising and all this and working, and I didn't realize anything was wrong with me until I came back from running one morning and I sat on the sofa to get ready for work, and I didn't wake up until 12 o'clock. I fell asleep, and this was morning, I always ran in the mornings, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, what happened?" So I called my secretary and I said, "Hey, I'm running late." She's like, "What happened to you?" I was like, "I don't know. I went to sleep and I just woke up." And so I called my mom and she said, "Oh, you probably a diabetic." I said, "Diabetic?" She said, "Yeah, you got sugar." I was like, "Oh my goodness." And so I thought I had sugar, and that was another episode of me finding out I was, actually pregnant. I didn't have sugar. When I went to the doctor, I told him, I said, "My mom says I've got sugar. I'm diabetic, and I need you to get me some insulin and all this other stuff." This was on a military base too. He said, "Let me examine you." And so he examined me and he looked at me and he said, "You do not have diabetes." I said, "Are you certain?" He said, "I'm certain." And he said, "But I think you might be pregnant." I was like, I cannot get pregnant. I've tried for years and we cannot get pregnant. We can't have no kids." And so he said he took some blood and he said, "Let me run a blood test and call me tomorrow." So I didn't have any faith in him or the blood test. So I left, we were stationed in Alabama at the time. So I drove home to South Carolina. Back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. At least everyday people didn't have cell phones. You might saw wealthy people with the cell phone case and antenna on their car, but regular
Yeah.
folks didn't have a cell phone. So he had to wait until I get back home. And so my husband called me. I was at my mom's house for a week, just hanging out. And my husband called me and said, "The doctor's been calling you." I said, "What for?" He said, "He won't tell me." And I was like, "What do you mean he won't tell you?" So I said, "I'll be home on Monday." So I came home on Monday. I called the doctor and I said, "What's going on, man?" Because he was a captain just like I was, same rank in the Army. And he said, "Where have you been?" I said, "I went to my mama's house. What do you want?" And he said, "Your test came back positive." I said, What test? What blood work?" He said, "Took all that blood." I was like, "Positive for what?" He said, "You're pregnant. Isn't that exciting?" And I was like, "No, that you're probably looking at the wrong file." I said, "It's not me. You're looking at the wrong Joneses." I said, "I'll be up there in a minute." He said, "Come on up, since you know so much." That's pretty much what he said to her. "Come on up, since you the doctor." So I came up and the nurses, they said, put on this robe and get on the hospital table. We're gonna do an ultrasound." I was like, "What are you doing that for? Let me see what you all are looking at." And so he did the ultrasound, and there was a baby in there with his legs crossed. So they couldn't tell if he was a boy or a girl. And I just was like, "You're kidding me." And he's like, "Yeah." He says, "You're 14 and a half weeks along."
Oh my goodness.
14 weeks? Like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Yeah." So I was like, "Oh, man." But I came back home and I called my husband, Linwood. I says, "I'm pregnant. My test came back positive for pregnancy." He said, "Pregnant?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Who's the daddy?" I hope it's you, because if it ain't you, I don't know who it is. So
So that was the
uh,
beginning of Daniel, huh?
that's the beginning of Daniel. So,
Oh my goodness,
and
that's awesome. So it was 6 years though before that
6 years.
happened?
Yeah, 6
Okay.
years.
So can we back up for a second and talk a little bit about
Yeah.
what it was like during those 6 years? Because you were a member of the church at that point, right?
I was, and I was a military officer. I was very active. Most military people are runners and things like that. And I was a member of the church. I joined the church in 84, and my son was born in 91. So I didn't get married until I was 25. And because I was 31 when I had Daniel. The church for me was real interesting because, first of all, as a young woman, young military officer, when I joined the church, a lot of the YSA girls, they wanted to get married and they want to have kids. And when I was an Army officer, I had a degree, I had a good paying job. The last thing on my mind was trying to marry somebody and have some kids. And because I was going to be a general in the Army, and so generals don't, you know, female generals don't come with a bunch of kids and husbands and stuff. And so that was my goal. I was looking at them like they had lost their minds because I'm like, y'all, what y'all need to do is go to college, get your education, and then maybe you can find somebody decent. And I was friends and I watched how they did things with them and stuff. We go up to the temple and we always talked about husbands and different things like that. But I really wasn't really into it. But I watched how some of the women in the church, even to this day, I watched then how some of them took their self-esteem from the husband's career or their children, how many children they had. And my mother had 5 children. I'm the oldest of 5. And sometimes my mother would see other women and she would say, some women are not good managers of children. They don't manage their children well. The children manage them. The children end up raising them. So I witnessed a lot of that kind of stuff too. I never said anything because I didn't have children of my own, and at that time also, when I first joined the church, just watching, look at, I had this sister in our ward, she had 6 kids, right? She was so frazzled all the time. She wasn't doing anything to refill her own cup. She wasn't managing her children. My mother would snatch me and say, when I speak, you listen. When I say don't run, you don't run. But I saw a lot of that. And I think I saw a lot of sisters that just gave up. They just kind of gave up, you know. Everything is everywhere. They just gave up. And then I ran across some sisters, 1 or 2 of them that were having difficulty, conceiving. But as a young YSA, a lot of the sisters I hung around with, they just had difficulty trying to get married and do their thing. And
Yeah.
but I've looked at the world a little different because I think because of where I was raised in South Carolina, then I was in the military and what I saw in the military. Whenever I saw women who were having difficulty in the military, uh, I would sit them down and talk to them. And even if they were the wives of my soldiers, I would talk to them. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, she gave birth to 11 children, 9 of which died.
My goodness.
She married in, yeah, from childhood illnesses. She got married in 1932, and her first child was born in 1933. But they all died from things like typhoid fever and whooping cough and influenza.
So you had a very unique perspective coming into your period of starting a family. I think a lot of us, especially if we have grown up in the culture of the church, and maybe we have those desires to have a bigger family or to get started young or whatever, and then if that doesn't happen, then we kind of okay, pivot and focus more on career. But you were very career focused from the beginning, it sounds like. And then you embraced the church, and that doesn't mean that you just brought it all in. You weren't cutting out your professional identity or anything, and you were planning on, like you said, a kid or two, but you didn't have these ambitions to have 8 or 10 kids.
Right,
Maybe
right,
some of us who have grown in the church may have had those thoughts at times, you know?
right, right,
So
right.
so you probably weren't as focused on the getting pregnant piece as intensely as maybe some of us may have been at times. And yet, as the years go on, did it become harder?
I took for granted that I could get pregnant. I
You
just
just
took it for
assumed it
granted.
would happen whenever you
I
wanted
just
it, whenever you
Yeah,
decided the time was right.
yeah, right, right. And when it didn't happen, Then I was like, "Oh my goodness, what do you mean I can't? I'm having a hard time." What? And so we do all these tests, ran all these tests. We did everything except in vitro back then. I don't know how less, but back then it was very expensive.
Oh, it still
You're
is.
talking the 80s, 90s, early 90s, and so I just said, "Bump it. If the Lord want me to have one, He'll send me one. Otherwise, I just won't have any. That's all." And so that was my view of it. And but in the church, here's the thing. In the church back then, anyway, what my experiences were, some people were so misguided, I don't know, cruel. And they would say things to me like, if you were really righteous, you'd have a baby. What?
Did
If
people really
you
made
were
that comment to you?
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And they made some real insensitive comments. It was
Yeah.
crazy, you know.
What did you do when you would get those comments? How did you take that? Did it make you question your faith? Did it
No,
make you
no. Mm-mm,
resentful, or did you
mm-mm.
just brush it off like you're dumb?
I just brushed it off because I was like, you know what? You got to be an extra special kind of person. And I realized I joined the church, Shannon. I was the only Black female in that entire state when I joined the church. When I brought my friends to my baptism, you would have thought it was a wedding reception. It was catered. They had a cake made. It looked like a wedding cake. They had my friends, my army buddies, they were like, "They are really glad to have you." I said, "I d I didn't know then that I was the only Black female. Now there was one other Black guy, and
Wow.
some of the sisters spent all my time in the church there in Texas trying to hook us up. And I told them, "I'm not trying to hook up with nobody. I ain't trying to marry nobody." And so I heard a lot of things. My bishop's wife said to me once, she said, "Why are you trying to go to our church? Why don't you go to a nice Black church?" I said, "First of all, this ain't your church." I said, "This Jesus
Bishop's
Christ
wife
church."
said that to you? Oh my.
And I told her, I said, "This ain't your church. You can't tell nobody who to come and when and not to come." I said,
Wow,
"This is
yeah.
Jesus' church. And when he come down and tell me, 'Janice, I don't want you coming to my church no more,' then I won't come." I said, "Otherwise, you need to merge left and get over there and make a turn because I'm coming." So I think I was getting ready to turn 24. So I was 23, fresh out of college, fresh out of Army, the training course. And young people, when they come out of college, they're full of themselves, so to speak. You think you're the smartest thing in the room. And that's how I was. But I know I was like that.
That
Time, but
probably served you well to some degree to be able to just see that person, like, they're off. That's not true doctrine. It's yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I didn't always feel bad about it. When we did get married, and I was stationed in the country of Panama. And so when I got married, I came back to Georgia and we were sealed in the Atlanta Temple. Then the Army sent us both to Germany. And when I got to Germany, church was different still, but you still had people that would come, brothers and sisters that would come from all over the world. We were all stationed there together. And so we were really like a big family, and we talked to each other like we were blood relatives. Everything from picking up each other's kids to driving, going to the airport to pick up their mom or their dad and bring them back home, feeding them dinner. We really were like a family. And so when we talked fertility issues over there, some of the sisters were like, "I guess the Lord doesn't love me." Or one sister, oh my goodness, she said, "I don't know why the church hates Black people." I said, "The church don't hate Black people. Where'd you get that from?" I said, "What am I, chopped liver?" And I told her, I said, "So people say," she had all these things about that she had heard about Black folks. They eat too much meat and all kind of stuff. I was like, "Girl," I said, "you're too young." And she was young, and she was from Utah, and she said all that kind of stuff. And but She and I got close because she was having a hard time conceiving, and I had been struggling too. But I had came to the conclusion that, well, I'm good. I guess the Lord wants you to have a child, he'll give you one. But I never felt unworthy. See, that's the thing in the church, sometimes sisters start to feel unworthy. The Lord doesn't love me, and the Lord doesn't, and that's not true. And a lot of times, um, we as Latter-day Saints, I know we do as Latter-day Saints, and I'm sure other churches do as well. But in the church, some of the sisters, they really feel like the Lord doesn't love them and he's not aware of them or what they're doing. But one thing, when I was talking to my grandmother said to me, now this is a woman who had buried 9 babies, 3 sets of twins. She
3
said
sets of twins,
her
oh my goodness.
3 sets of twins she had, and then but all of her babies died. Like I said, whooping cough, and she would tell me I would hold them all night, and because this is in the 30s. There's no doctors coming out to the country trying to doctor on Black folks in the 30s. I was born in 1960, and we were still having difficulty trying to get to a hospital that would admit Black folks. That don't happen. And this was the 60s now. I'm just 66. But I remember that Jim Crow era, and it wasn't no joke. And so a lot of her babies died, but she wasn't the only one. Her brothers and sisters lost children too. And she always had a good attitude about um, not having her children, not being able to have her children and keep her children. And she would always say they're with the Lord because they're babies. And I'll see them when I get there.
Wow, so she somehow already knew that.
She already knew that. She just knew that in her heart of hearts, she
Her
knew that she
soul.
would see those
Mhm.
babies again. So she would always tell me, "Don't worry about it. The Lord does what he wants to do because he's God. And there's a reason why he might not, maybe, you just never know." She said, "Don't worry about it. Don't spend any time. Don't waste any time worrying and crying over things like that." And so I didn't. I said, "Well, I ain't gonna worry." And then she also told my grandmother was the first one to tell me, "You have nieces and nephews. You can go over and mother them." She said, "They're more excited when you come home than they are when anybody else comes home." So and she was really right. There's 16 nieces and nephews, and I've got an additional 3, 4, if you count the children from the second wife that my brother has. So, and I just try to be a good aunt. So I went through years of trying to be a good aunt and still trying to be a good aunt. My goodness, they grown now, but my son is be 35 in September. And so that was it for us. And but just what makes it really hard for sisters, I think, in the church is that they listen to, their hearts are already tender. They're already feeling dejected or sad by not having children or not being able to conceive the way they want to or way they thought they would. And then we have sisters who have children who have a lot of mean things to say. And their behavior is not Christ-like sometimes, the things they say.
We talk about that a bit in our episodes here, how being a member of the church and having the gospel in our lives is such a blessing. Of course, it's the biggest blessing, but also it can be some of the hardest pains too
Mhm.
when we're all humans and people say insensitive things and they maybe don't realize how it comes across or they're just not thinking. And yes, we are very tenderhearted at times and things hit us in different ways, and maybe we're a little
Mhm.
more sensitive than we should be, because of
Mhm.
hormones or
Mhm.
whatever, but,
Mhm.
it can church can be a blessing, it can also be a real pain in a lot of ways, and that's an interesting dynamic to navigate sometimes when we're trying to figure out, "Am I gonna stay close to the church during this trial, or am I gonna withdraw because it's too hard and it's too painful?" So,
Mhm.
what did you ever have that challenge, that question of church? And it sounds like not just the infertility piece, but other cultural and social issues within the church. Were you ever tempted to be like, This is too hard. This is, y'all are not."
No, and Imma tell you why.
Okay.
Because when I joined the church, I felt like I had come home. I was one of those people I didn't join the church because I thought the Book of Mormon was true, even though I read it and I felt I had experiences that taught me that it was true early on, and I had peace that reading the Book of Mormon brings. But I felt like this was the Lord's church, and I felt like I should have been a member a long time ago, but I didn't know about it. I really felt the connection. So, and then also, I was stubborn and bullheaded, and I felt like my decision to join the church was a good decision. And so, when I was talking to my grandmother and my mom about it, my grandmother said, "At least you're going to church." And I said, "And we have a prophet." And she was excited. "Oh, you have a prophet? That's so great. He's a man of God." I said, "Yeah." And this is my grandmother who was born and raised a Baptist all her life. Her father was a social minister and all this stuff. But they never discouraged me. And my mother used to say, "You could be doing something else." She'd say, "You could be out there running the streets and hanging out in nightclubs and doing drugs and drinking alcohol." She said, "But you're trying to go to church." She said, "So you go to church and you stay in that church." My grandmother said, "If it's a church that you like and you enjoy it," she said, "stay in there." She said, "Stay in there." I was supported, but they also know that I would have stayed if I wanted to stay anyway.
It
I
was
was
gonna
living in
happen anyway.
it was gonna happen anyway. And so
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the church. I enjoyed Relief Society. I enjoyed the fellowship. I enjoyed Relief Society lessons, listening on Sunday, and how the sisters would discuss the lessons and things like that. But I never had a moment where I say, "You know what? I'm sick of y'all. I'm done. Bye." I never had that moment because a lot of the times I realized, I used to tell my husband and everybody, a lot of the times when people are offensive or say offensive things, they're not being malicious. Now, some people are being malicious, and you know those people. Those are the ones you answer back. When I was young and in Texas, in El Paso, First Ward, I stood up and bore my testimony. They said, "Go up there and bear your testimony." I went up there and bore my testimony. And I told them, I said, "Look, those of you that come up to me and tell me that this ain't my church, I don't need to be here." I said, "You don't even have to worry about going to Celestial Kingdom. Stop talking about it. You ain't going because the Lord ain't got time for that. He ain't got time for that. He don't care nothing about whether you black or blue or green. He made you that color. That's why you that color. You ain't nothing you gonna say or do in this world that's gonna change what the Lord has done. And He created you, and that's how He created you, and that's how you're gonna be." And so I said that. Look, and I said in the name of Jesus Christ, sit down.
That's
And
awesome.
when I think back, I said I used to be very much testimony and tell the people off in there that wasn't kind. But I always knew that this is the Lord's church. It's not my church. It's not your church. It's Jesus. The church. Jesus is. This is His church. And our brethren. I joined the church when Spencer W. Kimball was prophet, and all the great men that served with him in his presidency, in Eldon Tanner, and I forgot who was the other guy, Mary G. Romney, and all the great, we had so many wonderful, great general authorities from that time on. All of our prophets have just been phenomenal men that the Lord called to serve. And they have all tried to teach us and lead us to become more righteous, more holy, more Christ-like in everything we do. But we as members, sometimes we forget that Satan is watching us. And he wants us to be mad. He wants us to be discouraged. He wants us to have all of the issues we have. He wants us to step away. He wants us to say, you know what, I ain't going to church no more. That's what he wants us to do. And so I said, I started as I got older. I didn't do it in the beginning, but as I got older and I finally did become a mom, people would say, and people would still say insensitive things, even after you're a mom. And I had seen that with how other people talk to other, sisters, whether they had children or not. And so I said, you know what? That brother, that sister, I need to call their name in prayer when I pray, to pray for them because they need prayer because the Lord will have to touch their heart to help them to see a better way, to be better. So I never really hold it against people when they're offensive. I never held it against them. When I remember the first time I was called as Relief Society president, and a sister came up to me and she said, I can't believe they called you as Relief Society president. And I looked at her and I said, I can't either. I told the bishop, I gave him 10 names of sisters that I thought would do a much better job. But he said, no, the Lord has called you. And so I served in that calling. But people were sometimes, they just forget that we are all in this together and we need each other and we have to support each other the best way we can, whether that's in prayer and praying for them, whether that's helping and you're calling, or whether that's just showing up on Sundays. Because when I was in the military, and I was on military wards, when I was in Panama, I was in Germany, majority of the members were military. And we never had a lot of people who weren't at church unless they were deployed somewhere. Because our bishop would say to us, and he was military too, and he would say, you know where your place of duty is on Sundays? We're like, yeah, sitting here in this pew. He was like, that's right. This is your place of duty on Sunday. If you're not here, we're going to check on you. We're going to find out why you're not here. And so I had that kind of mentality throughout my life in the church, throughout working and serving. Even when I had Daniel, my son, we were stationed in El Paso. I was Young Women's President then. And I was like, what am I going to do? I got a baby and all this. But I didn't have to worry about it because once he was born, when I walked into the church building, someone always took him. And
Mm.
so he was, if he was with me and young women, the young women, they would pass him around and the Relief Society sister would say, I'm going to keep Daniel today. And so I didn't have to worry about him. And so the Lord always makes a way, those sisters. I believe that. And I also believe that the children that we don't give birth to here on this in this life, we will in the next, because our lives are eternal. And we don't know everything and we don't know why, but it is a blessing to think, for me, this is what goes through my head. It's a blessing for me to think that there are more children for me to have. Because my patriarchal blessing says I'll be a mother in Zion. It didn't say Zion on this earth, Zion in the next, this world or the next.
Yeah. I know that's something that a lot of us take comfort in, those promises that, okay, it may not happen now, but it will happen. And we just have to broaden our perspective and know that we have such a limited view and experience of what is and what will be. But it's also hard to keep that
Yes, it's
perspective.
it's it's very hard because you feel in your heart, this is where I used to feel anyway. I'm doing everything I can do to be a good, strong daughter of God, and I'm married in the temple, and I got a great husband, and I There are things that, I'm trying to do, and I just want a baby. I thought, and I'd have long talks, in prayer with the Lord but like I said, it took me 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this question. What would you say to others who are going through infertility and who aren't sure how their story's gonna go?
Would say to them, just remember that life is eternal. You're not going to get all your blessings here on this earth. I wish we could, but we're not going to get all our blessings here. And the Lord, He has work for us to do here. And sometimes that work doesn't include us mothering our children here on this earth. So that doesn't mean that we give up or step away from the church. That means that we need to be more faithful because we have children over there in the celestial kingdom or wherever God lives. That's where they are. And they probably look down, they probably look at us, they see us. I'll tell you an experience I had. I don't tell many people this, but when I found out I was pregnant and working and stomach getting bigger, we didn't know if we were going to have a little boy or a little girl anyway, because whenever we went to do the ultrasound, the baby was turned or his legs was crossed. We never could see.
It's very modest.
Yes, he was. They didn't have the technology then that they have now where they can determine by fluid and different things. And they wanted me to do, what was it, amniocentesis? They wanted me to do where they take a needle and pull out some fluid and all that. But I was like, no, you don't have to worry. I don't care if it's a boy or girl. It doesn't matter. It might have this, it might have that. I said, it doesn't matter what it's got. Once it's out, it's mine. So we never knew if it was a boy or a girl. And so, but one night, I was probably about, I know I was a good 8 months pregnant. And one night I had a dream. I couldn't tell if it was a dream or if it actually happened, but I know I woke up. And at the end of our bed was this little boy. He was about maybe 9 or 10. He was a pretty tall kid. It's about 9 or 10. And he had on a robe. He had on just a white robe, and I looked at him, and then I guess I went back to sleep. And he was just standing there at the end of the bed looking at me and Linwood. He was just looking at us. And I went back to bed. I woke up the next morning. I told Linwood, I said, I had a dream that a little boy was standing at the end of our bed looking at us. And Linwood said, well, last week I had a dream that I was shaving in the mirror and a little boy was standing beside me. I was like, okay, maybe we might have a boy. So we had names picked out for girl and boy. But just that the Lord blessed us to see. In another story, there was a brother in Alabama. He had been in the military and he had suffered brain damage while stationed in Korea. He married a Korean girl. I was her visiting teacher. Linwood at the time was in the eldest quorum presidency, and he was in and out of the hospital with brain surgeries and different things. And he was a young man, he was in his 30s. And so he had decided that he didn't want any more brain surgery. And that was it. He was just gonna pass away with the Lord's good timing. And I was visiting teaching his wife one day, and she was yelling at him. She was like, stop talking to yourself because he was home. And she said, all he does is talk to himself all day long. And I said, talk to himself? She says, yeah. And she yelled at him and she said, Tony, be quiet. And he said, I'm talking to Linwood and Janice's son. And she yelled back, they don't have any kids. You can't be talking to their son. And so uh, after he passed away and everything, because Linwood used to go to the hospital and read scriptures to him every day and after work. And, I tried to do my part, being a good visiting teacher to his wife and stuff. And he passed away. And then Daniel was born. And when Daniel was born, and she came over to the house and she looked at me and she said, Janice, she said, Tony was talking to your son. I said, that's what he said. And she looked at Daniel and she cried and she said, life is something else. I said, it really is. And the Lord shows us little small things every now and then. But for certain, his plan is the plan that we don't all understand all of it, but we have to stay strong and try to live through what we're going through, trying to be strong, you know. It's hard, but it teaches us too. All the nights you spend crying and praying, and it teaches us that we can get through the struggle. We still have to lean on the Lord. Everything that He wants for us that's good, we're going to get. And sometimes what He wants to give us is not worthy in this world. We don't need it in this world. He'll give it to us in the world to come. Because being worthy, or I should say, being loved of the Lord, does not mean that we'll have everything we want in this life. There are many righteous and good people that have very few things, very few of what we have. But they're righteous, their hearts are good, and one day they'll be blessed with those things. Just like those of us who wanted lots of kids. I always wanted 4 kids. We'll be blessed with those children. And our job here is to endure to the end so that we can be strengthened. They're so valiant, they're not here because the Lord needs them there and said, when your mom and dad get here, then, you know. Uh, so I often think of that when I think about people who take care of or work with or have anything to do with people who have mental, physical disabilities of any kind. I often think of those people with those disabilities as celestial beings because they chose to come down to take the bodies, even though the bodies had problems and issues, they decided to come anyway. And while they're here, those of us that come into contact with them, how we treat them, how we view them, that's us working to be Christ-like. How we treat them, what we say to them, how we view them, because they're already celestial. We have to get there. And the Lord bless us to come down with good working bodies and good working minds, and so we just have to remember that and try to um, just try to keep plugging along. It's tough.
But you've shared so many wonderful perspectives between your testimony of knowing that this is God's church, therefore nothing else matters. People's insensitive comments or rudeness or offensive things, you can let that fall away and just know that this is God's church and He wants me here. And so this is where I'm going to stay. That alone is a powerful testimony, an example for us to follow because it's so easy to justify not staying because our feelings
Yes.
were hurt or people were rude or whatever it is. So that, but also your stories that you shared about people interacting with your son or him before he was born, visiting. And that just, I've never been one to sense or feel much of the other side as far as specific individuals or entities or things like that beyond just kind of the spirit in general. And so I always appreciate when people share those types of stories because as you did, I felt it. I felt the spirit witnessing to me that that was true, that that happened for you. And therefore, it just was another confirmation to me that there's this whole existence that we cannot see into. We have very little perspective of, and yet it's there and it's full of blessings for us And so every now and then we might get a little glimpse of what that'll be. And that's what you shared with us, was just a little glimpse of there's this blessing in store, and you know what? There's more too. So thank you for sharing that and just all your perspectives. You've been through so much that so many of us cannot relate to because we haven't experienced it the way you have. As a young woman in the military and as a Black female joining the church where there are no others, you have such a unique perspective. And you are such an example of strength and commitment to the Lord and to Jesus Christ. And it makes me joyful to see you and to strive to follow that same example because that is what brings joy and help through all the struggles and everything that you shared there, that we can get through it all with his help. And that's just so beautiful. So thank you. Thank you so much. Pam, is there anything you want to ask Janice before I have one
Yes.
or two other questions, but
Yes, I've been holding this question because I'm curious, after you had your son, did you think or feel like maybe any hope that you might be able to have others? Did that like, you know, because with you're like, okay, yeah, it happened once, maybe it can happen again. And, how did that feel afterwards when, it didn't?
I was so certain that I could have another baby. I just think, "Oh my goodness, the floodgates open. I can do it." But after a while, you're like, "What in the world? How come I'm not able to?" And I was just so disheartened by it and crying and feeling bad and all that. And I called my grandmother and my mom one day. I was home visiting them, but they had heard me complain in the past about not being able to conceive again. And my grandmother said, she said, it's not quantity, it's quality. She said, so you have one, that's all the Lord's given you, and you just try to make him a quality person. I was like, that's not what I wanted to hear. But I did, I just was just so, it almost, it's like it threw me back into the cycle of, feeling bad. Even though I had a son, I wanted to have some more. And I was hoping that I could have some twins, maybe because my grandmother had so many twins, and nothing. And then I was 31 when I had him. By the time I turned 38, I had to be 38. My brother and his wife, the one with 8 children, they were going through some problems. So Linwood and I became foster parents to his children, which was great. And then Daniel had some kids, and they're still close to us. But so we had my nieces and nephews for 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years. And then they went back with their parents. But my sister said this to me, my baby sister. She said, if you had had a bunch of children, you would not have been able to help Ricky with his kids. I said, I sure wouldn't have. I said, because then I'd have 11 or 12 kids. And so we wouldn't have been able to do what we did with that. So the Lord, He can see the big picture, whereas we can't. And He's able to see if, how things are. He knew that we're going to have some issues
yeah.
with their children. And so we ended up with his 8 and as they graduated and moved on, and then the remaining 6 ended up being put back with the parents. But then, you know what? The youngest daughter, she came to live with us her last 2 years of high school. So she graduated from high school with my son. And so,
So there was a time when you had all 8 of them
yeah,
plus Daniel?
yeah, that's Daniel.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot for anyone, I would
'Cause,
think, so
because my brother and his wife, they joined the church. The children are all members, great members of the church, great kids, the youth programs and Boy Scouts and just doing all that. They were great. And then all of a sudden, they started back with the alcohol. They started back with the drugs. And the kids called and said, "Can you come get us?" I was like, "Oh my goodness, what in the world?" And so that's how we ended up with them through Child Protective Services picked them up. because they didn't know where their parents were, and they came home from school, and it was like,
That's
what a
another
mess.
good point that, yeah, we never know what circumstances in our life are gonna change really fast, and all of a sudden there's a need, and now because
Mhm,
of this other circumstance, you're in a position where you can fill that need. So even though it
mhm,
didn't seem like a
mhm,
blessing maybe at first, it turns into something that is a tremendous
mhm,
blessing for many other people. So
mhm,
that's really cool.
mhm.
So, are there any scriptures or quotes or hymns that you have especially loved that have helped you through infertility or any of the other challenges of just getting through?
There are so many hymns that I love to sing, and there's some that I listen to when I'm feeling like everything is not good. I'll listen to Who's on the Lord's Side Who, because I know and understand that one of Satan's biggest tools is discouragement. But sometimes it's so hard to not be discouraged. And so I sing that to myself. I play it in the car. And for years, I used to just sing Sweet is the Word, because that just touched me in a lot of ways. I just love that Sweet is the Word. But at my baptism, hymn number 2 was always playing. My baptism, I was like, I love that song. That's my favorite song. The Spirit of God like a fire. And when I'm out and about, I'm singing those songs, I'm thinking about things, I'm thinking about talks, I'm thinking about words from the prophets and church leaders. Just strengthens me and lets me know that as a daughter of God, I have to be, first and foremost, I need to be obedient. I need to be prayerful, because it's hard living in this world. And some of the things that we didn't think we care about, you find out I really do care about that. Is that important to the gospel? What does it matter? Is it going to be important in 500,000 years? So I learned to look at things that way, because I honestly and truly believe that life is eternal. And I love some of the new little hymns we have. And I put them in, and I just love Gethsemane and just all cute little hymns. I love listening to them. And anytime, anywhere, such a cute little hymn.
Yes.
Little primary kids singing it is so cute. And I love singing that. And just helping ourselves to stay focused, to stay prayerful, to follow our prophet. When I was primary president years ago, I think my son was like 3 years old. I was primary president. I had 23 kids, one teacher, one counselor, and a boom box. That's all I had. And half the kids we had to pick up and bring to church. And they called me to teach seminary. And I thought, I cannot teach seminary and be the primary president. Do y'all know those are two weighty callings? Try to do all that at one time. But I went on ahead and did it anyway. And I had my son with me. He was 3 at the time. And my husband was supposed to be my team teacher, but he was the branch president. So
But your husband was the branch president, you were the primary president and teaching seminary with a 3 oh my gosh.
we had 6 kids in seminary and a 3-year old. And I was thinking, man, how am I going to do this? But Daniel woke me up every morning. And he was more excited about seminary, I think, than any of the kids I was teaching, because at the time we were teaching Book of Mormon that year. And Daniel would be so excited to be in there. He would raise his hand every time I asked a question. He'd be the first one to raise his hand. And I'm waiting on the teenagers to raise their hand. They're like, Daniel's got his hand up. I'm like, Daniel is 3 years old. He's not a real seminary student. His answer was always the same:
Oh my
Nephites
gosh.
are Lamanites. And sometimes he was right.
Oh my gosh, that's
But
amazing.
but yeah, so I do love the hymns of the church and how they can be soothing to our souls. We just have to listen to them and realize that we're speaking to our Heavenly Father when we sing them.
I love that. Your life has been such a life of service to the Lord's kingdom. It is such an example to us. Just in the few things you've shared with us in the last hour, it's just so obvious that your life is dedicated to the Lord, and it's beautiful. And you have touched so many people with your testimony and your faith and your goodness and your smile and your laughter and all of it. So thank you for everything, for sharing it all. Is there anything else you want to throw out there? Anything else you want to share?
What I would like to share is one of the things that's most important to me. We had the missionaries over for dinner Friday night, and we were talking about the attributes of Christ. And they asked, "What is your favorite attribute of Christ?" And I said, "I don't have a favorite, but the one that always sticks with me a lot that I think of these days is the attribute of brotherly kindness, being kind to one another, realizing that we are all God's children. And it's just not something we say, but it is actually true. And when the Lord put us on this earth, He decided that this earth would be our earth, that He would put us here. He made that decision. It's His decision, how we look, where we live, our experiences. These are the things that He has for us here because these were things that we need to go through to learn and grow, to make ourselves what He wants us to be, so that when we return to Him, we will have had these experiences. We would have experienced grief, happiness, sadness, anger, frustration, all the things that some are good and some are not so good, but we would have experienced those things. How can you succor someone who has had difficulty with fertility when you haven't had with fertility? But I truly believe that we have the life that we have because we are strong enough to live this life. Some people can't go through what you've gone through and still be sane. But the Lord gave you these difficulties and these trials because He knows that we can make it through them. We can suffer on through. It's okay. We're going to be okay. And we may look back on the short time that we've been here on this earth and say to ourselves, why did I spend so much time worried about that, crying about that? Why did I spend so much time being angry about this? So it's just important that we understand, do our best to try to love one another, try to be there for one another if we can, but not allow Satan to come in. Satan has done so much damage on this earth. We can't allow him to continue to do what he's done to us, or we've decided that it's more important that uh, we believe this or believe that. Have you noticed that every year there is a primary presidential election? The church studies the Book of Mormon. I've had so many thoughts and said to Linwood so many times, we are living in Book of Mormon times. It's just so much. And Satan is just so busy. But we as Latter-day Saints, we have to be strong. We have to follow our leaders. We have to try to do our best to be good people and put good people in charge. If
I think you're absolutely right. This is a critical time, and we're getting ready for Jesus to come again. He's gonna come, and it's
Yes,
gonna be soon, and we have the opportunity to help prepare and get ready for it, or we can let it happen and not be a part of it and miss out on everything. And the division is what that's where we lose our power. When we're divided among each other, then the Spirit can't work in us the same way. We lose power from heaven, and that's where
Yes.
Satan comes in even stronger.
There used to be a manual that the church had that was entitled "The Gospel Shall Roll Forth." And I like that because the gospel is going to roll forth with or without us. We make the choice to join it and hang on because God is coming. Christ is coming back. And how we live our lives will determine whether we are happy to see him or whether we're ducking and dodging. We don't want him to see us because we haven't done all that we should. We haven't been the person that we should be. We get caught up in, especially in America. I've lived in other countries, but in America, we are really on this black and white thing. It doesn't make any sense at all because we're all shades of brown. There's a website called Shades of Brown. They talk about skin color, and you got the medical people that talk about it. We're all shades of brown. Some of us fair, fair, fair. Some of us dark, dark, dark. But we're all shades of brown. And irregardless of that, we're all God's kids. He created us. Because I'm telling you, if I had a say in how I was going to look coming down here, I'd be the cutest thing walking and the richest. But since I didn't have no choice, I'm just brown and brown, and that's it. But I just do believe that we as people, whether you're members of the church or not, we have to, at some point, come to grips that we're all God's children. And we can love everybody. He's told us that. So we know we can. He's given us scriptures and leaders to help us to try and do it. But we forget about Satan. There is a talk entitled Satan by um, President James E. Faust gave years ago. It's so good, so true. But we forget about those things. Satan is old, he says in that talk. Satan is conniving. He watches us. This is like the screw tape letters. Remember that,
Oh,
C.S.
yeah.
Lewis? Satan, he waits. He can take his time. And if we're not careful, we will fall under his spell, so to speak. These days, I'm looking and I'm just trying to hang on myself and just try to be good and righteous and try to think good thoughts of people, even though sometimes I feel like I want to choke them out. Still try to have some good thoughts. But I do believe also that these are the times that the Lord is allowing to happen because this is our refiner's fire too. In the world, there's always been um, diversity, there's always been adversarial situations. This is just not here. How we view the world and how we view God and what He has taught us um, will help us to be able to return to live with Him, to return with honor, as they say. And so that's it. I tell you, the world we living in, we're going to look back one day and say, we made it through.
We made it. We made it. Yes. My goodness. Janice, thank you so much for your time and your faith and everything that you've shared. It really, I think, is valuable for others. And I think if there's one thing that I could point out from everything you've shared with us today, it's that we're going to go through hard stuff and we're going to be offended, and Satan is going to do his best to turn us from the Lord. And that's where we'll be weakened and things will get harder. And if we can just stay connected to God, then He will help us get through whatever offenses, whatever trials, whatever withheld blessings we feel like we're not being given. He'll help us get through that because He is our Father. Every single one of us, we are His children, and He loves us dearly, and He has amazing blessings in store for us. So thank you for reminding us of all of that and the importance of just loving each other and bringing that power of God into our relationships and our faith and our love and service. Thank you. We
You're
like to
welcome.
end all of our episodes with a quote from President Uchtdorf.
It's one of my favorites.
Yes, me too. And this is one of my favorite quotes from him because I feel like it applies to this trial of withheld blessings, but also moving forward. This is what he said: Never stop hoping for all of the righteous desires of your heart, but don't close your eyes and hearts to the simple and elegant beauties of each day's ordinary moments that make up a rich, well lived life.
I love that. I love that. And
Yeah,
thank you, sisters, for all that you do to talk about this issue, to discuss infertility. It helps other sisters to realize that they're not in this alone, and that they're not, that the thoughts and feelings they have, uh, that others have those same thoughts and feelings.
absolutely.
So I'm just so happy for that both of you are doing that, and I love you and appreciate you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. And that is our
Thank
goal, that
you.
just to remind anyone out there who may be listening, if you're going through infertility, you're not alone. Thank you so much for listening today. We want to invite anyone who would like to share their own story to reach out to us. We have a Facebook group called Full Faith Empty Arms LDS Infertility Support that we're trying to get started and grow. We're also on Instagram at Full Faith Empty Arms. So feel free to get in touch with us through either of those channels. And please go on and find those pages and help us gain a little bit of momentum there so that more people will see some resources out there for support. Because there are probably a lot of people who can relate to your unique struggle. We just have to connect. And please also go ahead and subscribe or follow the show so that you'll learn about new episodes as they're released. Thanks so much and have a great day.